The Battle of Hattin took place on July 3rd to 4th, 1187, at the Horns of Hattin, near Lake Tiberias in Galilee. It was the day the Kingdom of Jerusalem dismantled its own survival mechanisms. Not because the enemy was unstoppable, not because miracles failed to appear, but because a single decision was made, under pressure, illusion, and blind honor. In the burning summer of Galilee, a Crusader army abandoned the last water source it controlled. They marched in heavy armor. They carried sacred symbols, and they believed faith would replace logistics. One side possessed water, time, and vision. The other carried honor, pressure, and illusion. 10 years earlier, at Montgisard, Saladin had lost a battle he was never supposed to lose. He did not rush to avenge it. He did not chase glory. He did not demand a rematch. He waited. He studied time, terrain, and the rhythm of war. Jerusalem, meanwhile, stepped out from behind its walls and walked straight into a land with no water. Why would a disciplined army choose to march toward its own extinction? If you want to understand how history rarely kills with swords, but often with decisions, stay with me. By 1187, Jerusalem was no longer the miracle of 1099. For nearly 90 years, the Crusader states had survived on borrowed strength. European enthusiasm had faded. Reinforcements arrived slowly, or not at all. The kingdom was fractured. Barons distrusted their king. Commanders argued strategy in public. Political survival began to outweigh military sense. Jerusalem did not lack enemies. It lacked agreement. It lacked a single shared understanding of survival. Across the frontier, the Muslim world was changing. What had once been divided was now unifying. Saladin was no longer the commander defeated at Montgisard. He had consolidated Egypt, secured Syria, and stabilized his supply lines. More importantly, he had learned. Montgisard had taught him what not to do. Never fight when time is against you. Never seek honor when patience can decide the war. He no longer searched for honorable battles. He searched for irreversible outcomes. Inside Jerusalem, 3 men embodied 3 futures. Guy of Lusignan, a king by marriage and politics, not by authority. He wore a crown, but lacked the confidence of his barons and the obedience of his generals. Raymond of Tripoli, experienced, cautious, a man who understood both Saladin and the land itself. He had ruled as regent. He had negotiated truces, and he believed survival mattered more than pride. Then there was Reynald of Chatillon, violent, defiant, a man who treated treaties as suggestions. In 1186 and 1187, Reynald attacked Muslim caravans, including pilgrims, violating a truce that Saladin had honored for years. The sources are clear on this point. Both Muslim chroniclers and Latin accounts record Reynald's raids as the final trigger. Saladin did not respond with rage. He responded with preparation. He called for jihad, not as revenge, but as consolidation. And when he marched north, his objective was not Jerusalem. It was the Crusader field army itself. Because once that army was gone, the kingdom would collapse on its own. By early July 1187, Saladin's plan was already complete. Not on the battlefield, but in the minds of his enemies. He did not need to destroy Jerusalem's walls. He did not need to storm its gates. He only needed the Crusader army to leave its water. Tiberias was the bait, a city of limited military value, but immense political weight. Raymond of Tripoli's wife was inside. Saladin knew exactly what this meant. The Crusader leadership gathered at Sephorus, the last strong position with abundant springs. Here they had water. Here they had time. Here they could force Saladin to come to them. Raymond understood this. The sources agree on this point. Both Latin chroniclers, including Ernul and the continuators of William of Tyre, record Raymond arguing for restraint. He warned them. Saladin was not reckless. He was patient. And patience favored the defender with water. But the strategy lost to politics. Guy of Lusignan did not decide as a general. He decided as a king under pressure. The Templars demanded action. Honor demanded movement. Inaction was framed as weakness, even betrayal. And so the system broke. Jerusalem chose symbolism over survival, movement over position, faith over logistics. No alternative plan was prepared. No fallback position was designated. No consideration was given to water beyond the next march. This is not speculation. The chronicles are silent on contingency because there was none. On July 3rd, 1187, the Crusader army marched east. They left Sephorus at dawn. Nearly 20,000 men, knights, infantry, camp followers, moving as a single column, under a July sun, in heavy mail, with limited water, across dry ground. Saladin did not engage. He watched. His cavalry shadowed the flanks, harassing, delaying, never committing. This was not a battle. It was erosion. Modern military historians often describe this phase as the decisive engagement, even though no swords crossed. By afternoon, the effects were visible. The columns stretched, discipline frayed. Men drank what little water they had left. Horses suffered first. Without cavalry momentum, the Crusader army lost its only offensive weapon. As night approached, they realized the truth. They had not marched toward Tiberias. They had marched into a trap. A system built on cohesion had been forced into motion, and motion destroyed it. Before a single decisive blow was struck, the war had already been lost. Night fell, but relief did not come. The Crusader army halted near two low hills, the horns of Hattin. They were close enough to see Lake Tiberias, but too far to reach it. Saladin tightened the ring. His cavalry advanced along the flanks, not to engage, but to deny movement. They harassed, they delayed, they never committed. This was not a battle. It was erosion. No one was dying yet, but everyone was becoming weaker. Every path toward water was sealed. Saladin controlled the approaches to Lake Tiberias. Every descent, every ravine, every route. Then came the fires. Dry grass was set alight upwind. Smoke rolled through the camps, thick and choking. Heat intensified. Breathing became labor. Panic spread through exhausted ranks. This is recorded in multiple Muslim and Latin sources. Ibn al-Athir describes the smoke as suffocating. Latin accounts describe coughing, confusion, terror. This was not just psychological pressure. It was a physiological collapse. Dehydration, heat exhaustion, and muscle failure. Men had marched all day without water. They fought smoke without air. They faced dawn without sleep. The real battle had already been fought during the night. By dawn on July 4th, 1187, The Crusader army was already broken, not routed, but exhausted beyond recovery. They formed battle lines anyway. They had no water. Their horses were failing. Their formations were loose. Raymond of Tripoli led the first charge. This was not desperation. It was a calculation. He aimed for the weakest point in Saladin's line, hoping to break through and reach water. For a moment, it worked. Raymond and a small group punched through the encirclement. Saladin let them go. This was deliberate. Muslim sources note this clearly. Saladin was not interested in pursuit. He was interested in collapse. The gap closed behind Raymond. The rest of the Crusader army remained trapped. In the center, Guy of Lusignan advanced, slowly, heavily, without momentum. Archers surrounded him. Arrows did not need to kill. They needed to wound, confuse, exhaust. The Crusader infantry faltered. The holy relic of the true cross was raised to steady the line, but faith could not restore strength. By midday, discipline dissolved. Men dropped shields. Knights dismounted. Units stopped responding to commands. Saladin waited. Then, he struck. Heavy cavalry surged from the flanks. Infantry pressed from the front. This was the moment Montgizard had denied him. This time, the Crusaders had nothing left to answer with. The line collapsed. What followed was not a battle. It was a slaughter. Ravines and slopes turned retreat into entrapment. Men fell where they stood, or were cut down while fleeing. Ibn al-Athir calls it one of the greatest disasters to ever befall the Franks. By afternoon, it was over. The Crusader field army ceased to exist. By late afternoon, the field was silent. Not with peace, but with absence. The Crusader army was gone. Not defeated, not withdrawn, erased. King Guy of Lusignan was captured, along with much of the high command. The relic of the true cross, the most sacred symbol of the Crusader kingdom, was taken. Latin chroniclers describe this moment as spiritual collapse as much as military defeat. For many, the loss of the cross meant one thing. God had not abandoned them. They had abandoned reason. Reynald of Chatillon was dragged before Saladin. The sources are unusually consistent here. Both Muslim chroniclers, including Baha ad-Din ibn Shaddad, and Latin accounts record the same scene. Saladin offered Reynald water. Reynald drank. Saladin turned to Guy and explained that kings were spared. Then he returned to Reynald. This was not rage. This was the fulfillment of a vow, for broken treaties, for murdered pilgrims, for a war deliberately provoked. Saladin executed Reynald with his own hand. Guy lived, but his kingdom did not. Within days, the consequences of Hattin spread faster than any army. There was no Crusader field force left to contest open ground. Castles could not maneuver. Cities could not resist alone. Galilee fell first, then Acre, Nazareth, Sidon, Beirut, Ascalon. Some cities were assaulted. Most surrendered, not out of fear, but out of calculation. They knew the army that should have saved them no longer existed. This is confirmed across sources. Muslim chroniclers note the speed of the collapse. Latin writers speak of shock, paralysis, disbelief. Jerusalem now stood exposed, not besieged yet, but defenseless. A kingdom without an army. It is already defeated. Hattin did not end the Crusades. it did something far more decisive. It ended a belief. For nearly a century, the Kingdom of Jerusalem survived, on the assumption that faith guaranteed survival. Hattin shattered that illusion, not because faith was weak, but because faith without discipline collapses under reality. History remembers these battles for different reasons. Montcoussard, 1177, was about timing. Eger, 1552, was about endurance. Hattin, 1187, was about self-destruction. One enemy defeated, one fortress that refused to fall, one kingdom that dismantled itself. The lessons are timeless. Militarily, control water, and you control war. Historically, no empire collapses because its enemy is stronger. It collapses because it breaks its own foundations. And in everyday life, no system survives once it dismantles the principles that kept it alive. Jerusalem fell months later, not because its walls were weak, but because its army had vanished at Hattin. And yet, there is a deeper twist. Saladin did not become a legend at Hattin because he destroyed an army. He became a legend because of what followed. When Jerusalem surrendered, there was no massacre. Churches were spared. Civilians were ransomed, not slaughtered. Even Christian chroniclers recorded this with restraint, sometimes with admiration. Saladin proved that victory did not require annihilation. War does not belong to the strongest. It belongs to those who understand. How long have they been truly fighting? In your view, what was the single worst decision in military history? And next, how did Jerusalem finally fall?